are some company insights that we'll be discussing. So one of the companies chosen was Jobwell. And so now we're going to basically just talk about like specific companies within our 500 buckets and why 500 companies in our database and why these stood out. For one, Jobwell raised $12 million in a Series A funding. And they had investors such as Alumni Ventures and Y Combinator. Y Combinator was also actually an additional website like GetLaka or Crunchbase, which provides the information on the companies that we were looking at. Their culture, they hired a leadership team of 36% women and 55% Black and or Latin, and Vanity Fair's Future Innovators Index, and 40/30 under 30 as top innovative ideas for the industry. And one of their customer base, they're affiliated with 200 companies, one of them such as the National Hockey League. And they have a really strong social media presence with 18,000 Facebook followers and 14,000 Instagram followers. And the next company of focus was Oracle. It is also a woman-led company, and because it was actually one of the largest revenue making companies, we had to exclude it out of our total look of revenue because it was so high that it basically took over the whole chart that we had. So we made this graph according to just companies, not including Oracle. So they had a $40 million in revenue, and they are a publicly traded company. And their affiliated customer base is AutoZone and Fujifilm. And they also have a very high social media presence with 292,000 followers and 8 million followers in LinkedIn. To add more companies from our 500 companies database, we have these companies in these different sectors like HR, recruiting, training and development, and payroll. And these are the graphs also to represent where they stand. So Bamboo, for example, with a 75.2 million in revenue, is part of the HR data and analytics portion, which is one of the biggest buckets that we have. And then we have our smallest, which is payroll and benefits, and Paychecks, for example, is one of the companies that would fall within that bucket. So all of these companies have like a color in what the graphs that we're showing. And then again, we also provided a graph to show where these companies stand within the funding raised by each service category that we had. And again, like it's showing that HR data and analytics is definitely the top group of revenue and funding. So recommendations, major highlights. So if you look at the Excel file that we created, is actually very refreshing seeing how we started with literally a blank slate, a blank Excel sheet, and then now to see like all of these companies that we have. It's actually a little bit overwhelming because you just see numbers, you see names, but using the KPI modules actually paint the picture for us. So now that we actually have the data that we need, it's one of the recommendations for us when we were looking at the data that we had was perhaps looking at all the trends and that the big companies were doing, that the top funded, top revenue companies, and see how their successes could be used to provide recommendations to the low funding, low revenue companies. Now that we have, all of these companies within the database. So again, our next focus after the completion of the 500 companies would be to narrow down our focus on different categories or selections of the database. For example, we could create a sheet for just company emails and company investors, or we could also focus on companies with specific demographics such as women, Black, Latino owned, or disabled, just to say a few. So gathering essentially the information that we have from our database and narrowing to whatever focus we want to, or to whatever business partner to our client would want to see.